Hi, my name is Lee Santo, Training Manager with the Texas Engineering Extension Service, the Public Safety and Security Training Division. One of the things we do out here is teach police officers how to use firearms, and we're out here today at the TEACS Firearms Training Range to talk about gun safety and the 4 universal rules of gun handling. All right, the first one we're going to talk about, treat all firearms as if they're loaded, all the time. Down here I have a couple of training props with me. Got a couple of live firearms here I want to make sure that I'm showing while we're talking about it here today. But for purposes of training and making this safety tip, we're going to use some training guns. This is a blue training gun. It's a rubber gun, and we use it quite a bit in training if we need to do some kind of training where we're going to point guns at each other. For purposes of this instruction, we're going to talk about the 4 general universal rules of gun handling, and I'll use these when I need to demonstrate the use of a firearm. So number one rule, treat all guns as if they're loaded. That means all the time. More people have been injured by supposedly unloaded firearms than anything else, and there's no excuse for that. If we treat the guns properly and respect them, we shouldn't have any problem. So all guns are always loaded is the first rule. Every one of them. If you see one and you don't know what to do with it, leave it alone. Treat it like it's loaded. Don't touch it if you're not sure how to handle it. The second rule is never point the muzzle of a firearm at anything you're not willing to destroy. And when I'm talking about the muzzle on my training handgun here, I mean the end where the bullet comes out. All right, that's where the projectile leaves the weapon. I do not want to point that thing at anything I can't fix or replace. That means my own person, somebody that I don't intend to shoot, or anywhere inside my home or wherever I may be where I don't want the projectile to hit and kill or injure some person. Remember that firearms by their design are inherently dangerous if they are mishandled. So I don't point this end of the weapon, the muzzle end, at anything I'm not willing to destroy. And while I'm talking about that, I got to find a safe direction when I'm handling firearms. Out on the firearms range, it's pretty easy for us to find a safe direction. The safe direction is where we post our targets. But if you're handling a firearm inside your own home or in your vehicle, you might not always know where a safe direction is. Here in the classroom, we've got walls that are made out of sheetrock. All right, sheetrock doesn't stop bullets, so that may not be the best place to point my firearm when I'm handling it. I have to take into consideration that if I'm inside my home and the interior walls are made of sheetrock, I gotta think about what's on the other side of that wall. That might be my children's bedroom. I might live in an apartment complex where there's people living next door to me. If I live on the top floor in an apartment complex, pointing the weapon down at the floor may not be the best place to do it. And if I live on the bottom floor, pointing it up may not be the safest place to do it. If I have an exterior wall that's made out of brick, now that might be the safe place to point my firearm because that might stop a bullet. So always be aware of where you're pointing the muzzle, and don't point at anything you don't tend to hurt, destroy, and you can't fix it or replace it. All right. The third rule of firearms handling is keep your finger off the trigger until your sights are on target and you're ready to shoot the weapon. All right. Most modern firearms have a variety of safety mechanisms. They cannot fire by themselves. They will only fire when they're loaded, chambered, and the trigger is depressed. So when we're handling weapons, we keep our finger off the trigger until our sights are on target and we're ready to shoot. If I took a grip on my training gun right here and I was not up on the representation of the target that I wanted to shoot, my finger would stay off the trigger until such time as I'm ready to point it up, line up the sights, get on target, and then my finger would travel to the trigger to engage the target and make the shot go off. So whether I'm getting it out of my holster, getting it out of my pistol case, whether I'm putting it back into my holster, my finger stays off the trigger until my sights are on target and I'm ready to shoot. And then the fourth safety rule is know your target and what's beyond your target. Out here on the range, it's pretty easy for us to figure out where the targets are and what's behind it because we shoot into a large bullet trap. But if you're going out for recreational firearms use, you may not always have the luxury of a backstop to shoot into. What you need to be aware of is what's back there and how far a bullet will travel, because they typically travel very far if they're uncontrolled. So you want to make sure you have a backstop that's capable of stopping the caliber of bullet that you're shooting at all times. All right? And that also, way we teach police officers as well, is if they're engaged in a lethal force confrontation where they have to use deadly force and there's a chance that they might discharge their firearm, is they have to know who the bad guy really is and what's behind the bad guy, because the bullet may not stop there. So they're always responsible for where those bullets travel, just like everyone else should be. So if you're going out for a day of shooting to practice your skills, make sure you know what your target is and where the bullet's going to stop when you're using your firearms. All right, so just to review the 4 rules that we talked about. Number 1, treat all firearms as if they're loaded, all the time. Number 2, never point the muzzle at anything you are not willing to destroy. Can't fix it or replace it, don't point the gun at it. Number 3 is keep your finger off the trigger until your sights are on target and you're ready to shoot. And number 4 is beware of what your target is and what's beyond your target. And those are the 4 universal safety rules.